Of all the vast tides of migration that have swept through history, maybe none is more. Okay, maybe it really perhaps sounds better. Perhaps none is. But wait a minute, we're talking about the tides of migration in history. So that has to be past. So perhaps none was more concentrated. So perhaps it is none that, or perhaps none was more concentrated than the wave that brought, okay, so it looks like E is the correct answer. Okay, so what's going on here? Of all these, tides of migration, this phrase, tides of migration, that's swept through history, right? There's multiple tides, and the author is saying, well, maybe none, or perhaps none, is more concentrated as. Well, we know is wrong because we're talking about history. So if you're talking about history, well, perhaps none was more concentrated. And this phrase more, it should be more than, not more as, right? So more as is wrong, and also because is should be was, that's why A was no good. From there, we chose, instead of maybe none, perhaps none. That just sounds better. Perhaps it is none. That sounds a little bit awkward, this part right here. Perhaps it is none. And so that's why our attention went to E, and we checked E to see if that's okay. And it turns out E was okay. Now, what if we looked at B and D? Of all the tides, it may be that none is more concentrated as. Same issue, more as. Of all the tides, maybe it is none that was more concentrated than. Or so more than is correct, but maybe it is none. That sounds a little bit awkward. If you had to choose between that and perhaps none was is definitely better. So that's why we choose E as the correct answer. Now, as a recap, we have of all this stuff, of migration, this is cut the fluff, of all the tides, right? We're talking about tides, and we're also talking about the ones that have swept through history. So of all these guys, we're talking about a specific one that was more concentrated than. So a specific one that was more concentrated than. So this is the phrasing we want. Maybe, it sounds a little bit less preferred than perhaps. So because of these three reasons, the perhaps, the was, and then the more than, that's why E is our final answer. You choose that and move on.